together so that you guys can see my presentation. Going to be totally transparent. It is as full screen as I can have and still see my notes, and I need my notes. So sorry that you guys can see a couple tabs there. All right, so I like to start with this just to sort of acknowledge the reality of what is going on these days. I think as parents, it's very easy to put undue pressure on ourselves, but I think also that calling this homeschooling is a misnomer, right? We are kind of doing like emergency education and life triage. And I just like to have that in mind as I go through each of my days so that I can be kind to myself, because I really feel like the only way we get through this is if we're flexible. And I personally have tried, I'm now on I'm going to say my third iteration of a family schedule, and they have both had their pros and their cons. But as the situation unfolds and as schools change what they're doing, we are also changing what we're doing. And some of it works and some of it gets a little crazy. And that is okay. So with that in mind, let's just talk about reasonable expectations. My expectations for my family during the day are that my kids learn something, not everything, something. Hopefully we all stay sane. And I will say that that was a huge challenge week one. I feel like now every day we're getting to the end of the day sane. And ideally that everyone has a little bit of fun, just because we are here together, and there's, as stressful as that can sometimes be, there's also an opportunity there. And I don't want to forget that I love my kids and I like spending time with them. So I try to do each of those three things every day. Beautiful. And then before diving into a schedule, I think it's important to just sort of take a step back also and look at the bigger picture, right? So in terms of goals, I didn't explicitly say this, right? But just in terms of thinking about what the priorities are for your family, I think mental and physical health are obviously top for all of us. And it's easy to get bogged down with all the assignments that schools are sending or with other things that we feel like we have to do. But you want a schedule that's going to allow everyone to feel good during their day. I also think it's important to just be aware of this idea of seat time, right? I think as parents in a normal world, right, our kids get on the bus or in the subway or they leave walking, however they get to school, you drive them, somewhere around 7:30 to 9:30 in the morning, and they come home somewhere between 2:30 and 4:30. And that's a long time, but the reality is that not all of that time is core academic time. So for elementary kids, even when they're going to a full school day, you're looking at a maximum of about 3 hours of core academic seat time. And even within that, I would add the caveats of it's core academic seat time with some large number of children in a room, right? So there are chatting breaks that go on, and there are transitions between activities, right? And there are other just things that even that core academic time isn't hyper focused. All of that to say, if you get through the day and your elementary child has spent about 2 hours actually working, that's amazing and awesome, and as much as they would do in school, right? For middle and high schoolers, those numbers get up to closer to 3 to 4 hours. But even so, that's different than, the 6 or 7 that they're outside of our homes when we're not in the middle of all this craziness. And just having that in mind, I think, can take a lot of pressure off of coming up with all the wonderful activities. Also, there's different considerations for every family, right? So, some of us have 2 people working full-time from home. Some of us have 2 people that are furloughed. Some of us have 1 at home working and 1 away. And all of those things impact what you as a family might need, the ages of your kids. And so I would just encourage everyone to start there and think about what has to happen. I know, I need to do these webinars sometimes or have calls. And so it is not possible for me to have an exact schedule every day because, the calls happen at different times. And so my family schedule needs to be flexible. Maybe other people have more rigid schedules that need to be accommodated. And then I think the other potential thing to consider is just Are you going to do the same schedule every day? Are you going to treat weekends differently than the weekdays? Are you going to have sort of your weekday schedule, but have one day that you try to pull back on the structure and try to do fun things? All of those things are good moves. Sorry, you hear the ringing? I feel like I need to explain that. My sister and I made a little family pod together. So we are isolating together to help with childcare. And she has something in this room that rings, and I don't know what it is. Can't get rid of it. Apologies. Okay, so those are the first things first, right? Sort of just taking a step back and looking at the big picture. And then as you build your schedule, you want to actually look at kind of the nitty gritty of things that you might want to include, right? I don't think anyone's forgetting to include school time. But other things that I think are absolutely worth including are chores. Your kids are home, you are home. There's lots of things that need to get done. And this is kind of a cool time to build a little increased responsibility for the younger kids and for the older kids to kind of help them move towards the independence that will serve them well when they move on to college. You know, maybe you can get your teenager cooking once a week so that they can eat food when they leave your home in a few years or in a year. Also the idea of actually building in time with parents, because, you know, as I mentioned earlier, I think this is a great opportunity to take advantage of time with kids, right? So if you've got something that you really enjoy doing, you know, or a project that you're taking on as something to help keep you sane, maybe you do a portion of that with your kids. I know of one mom who has kids that are in high school and they're spending most of their day in their rooms doing a bunch of work. But she's scheduled just one-on-one walks with each of those kids to connect and check in on how they're doing. And I think just being intentional about making sure you have a connection with your kids every day is super important. I also feel the pain on wanting to lean hard on the screens. Our rules have certainly shifted during this time, but some element of screen time guidelines is also going to be important, whether it's a full day time limit or there's a portion of the day where you have screens and a portion of the day where you don't, whatever that is. It's easy for that to get out of control. And also full transparency or full permission, if that's what it is, that can vary by day, right? I know in our current schedule, I've got a day where it's like, this is just the day where there's a lot of work, and I know this is the day where I'm going to be weak and allow the screens, and that then allows me to adjust the other days so that we can all survive and not feel super guilty, but also try to have some sort of balance. Planning time is a huge one. I think, again, there's huge variety about what the different school districts are doing, so it's hard to give blanket advice, but many of the districts are giving assignments in the morning, which make it hard to have a weekly plan because you don't know what you're being asked to do until the day of. And so I think it's a great idea to start off the day with 30 minutes where everyone plans together. And that might be, you know, your student has a schedule that has a block of academic time, but they're taking and plugging in specific assignments, right? Or it might be you all look at an hourly timetable together based on your own schedule, but just sort of having some time to get a handle on the day. And then also accountability. Some of the schools are building that in, and so good for you, you don't need to do it. Some of them aren't, and so it's interesting to think about how to motivate kids right now, because grounding, for instance, a lot of people's favorite, like not much of a threat these days. So this is a time where I think we really need to look at positive discipline. So the idea of trying to identify something that your student, your kid is excited about. And, you know, if they're following the schedule, or if they're getting their schoolwork done, or if they're doing the chores, or if they're just not having a breakdown during the day, whatever the bar is in your house, maybe as they accomplish those things, they're earning points towards, you know, being able to buy new art supplies, or being able to earn their screen time, or whatever it is, but looking for positive ways for them to earn through their good work. All right. And goals, right? I think I've touched on a lot of this, right? But the idea that different schedules are going to exist depending on what your goals are, right? Is the goal simply to keep the kids entertained so that they aren't kind of interrupting your workflow? Is it to build their independence? Is it specifically to prevent academic backslide? Do you have other things in mind? I would just reinforce here it's okay for different families to have different goals, but that depending on what they are, that's going to obviously impact how much time you spend on different aspects of a schedule. All right, nitty gritty of some schedule types. This needs to be fixed. Sorry, guys. So block schedules, right? I think these are really great, particularly for high schoolers or older kids who can be a little bit more independent. It's super important to have different parts of the day, right? So you can have a couple hours that are dedicated to academics, followed by a block that perhaps reminds them to eat, followed by a block that is active outside or a passion project, right? And then those blocks, the way the kids fill those blocks can change day to day. If you're in a district, and I know there are still some out there that have almost no structure to what they're giving you, I have often found it helpful when I don't have enough structure to create structure through themes, right? So pick topics of interest to your children and build your activities on a given day around those. Task-oriented schedules or task-oriented to-do lists can be really helpful if it's not possible for you to link your daily schedule to exact times. I've given my 7-year-old a list of things that she needs to accomplish during the day. So that includes taking our dog for a walk. I want her to read to her younger brother every day. Obviously her schoolwork, and she's got a list and she goes through every day and checks those off, but it's up to her the order in which she accomplishes those. And then there's, can I go back? Oh, I ruined it, guys. There's also the traditional schedule. And if your schools are super structured and doing live classes, it might just be easier to kind of lean into that a little bit. All right, some creative ideas, just in terms of things I've seen people doing with their schedules that I think are super fun and effective and might not otherwise be things that we think to do. I love the idea of having a shared family chore list, right? So if there's a point in everyone's day where they're responsible for a chore, and then we've got one list that the entire family is pulling from, because the chores that are necessary might change day to day. And if we're all checking off of the same list, that's going to be more efficient and effective. I talked about daily planning time. I will skip that here. I think it's super important to alternate the kinds of activities that kids are doing during the day. It is a drag to try and do all of your 2 or 3 hours of academic time straight in a row. So you're going to want to allow kids to alternate between academics and movement and creativity and all those things. And then separating screen time from other activities. I know a lot of academics right now is screen-based, but I've seen some families do academics, no screens allowed, and then academics, screens allowed, just as a way to try to control that a bit. Man, guys, sorry for the weird formatting stuff going on today. The last piece is to talk about executive functioning, because I know this is a question that lots of families have had when I've done these chats. If students struggle with managing their time and remembering what's going on generally, this is going to be a hard time for them, right? Because all of their structures and all of their routines have been removed. And I think step one in supporting students with that is just to acknowledge that it will be hard, right? And to be okay with that and to be honest with them about that, as opposed to say, oh, it's easy, you've got this, no problem. Because then it feels bad to them when it's a struggle. I also think for students, and sometimes for us, timers are incredibly powerful. So if you're gonna do a work block, set a timer for that. I really like the idea of using Pomodoro timers. So that's about 20 or 25 minutes of focused work, followed by a 5-minute break. And after you do 3 of those rounds, then you get a half-hour break. It's an extremely motivating way to work. One, because our attention span and kids' attention span doesn't tend to be much longer than 20 minutes. And so we're lying to ourselves if we're gonna just drill for an hour. And 2, because if a kid gets frustrated and then they look at their timer and they see, you know what, I've only got to push through for another 7 minutes. That feels much more doable than to feel like you have to stay focused and push for an undetermined amount of time. Also, the timers for the breaks are great because it brings you back, right? It's easy to say, I'm going to take a quick break and look at, Snapchat, but then we get sucked in and quickly an hour has gone by. So timers are key. Working together, and by this I mean working in the same physical space as your children, can just create sort of an environment where work is what's going on, and that can be helpful to kids who are otherwise easily distracted. And then I think also for all of us, the idea of a daily reflection on what went well today, what aspects of today's schedule were good for me, what aspects were not super good. And this is powerful for kids, not only because it will impact their ability to be successful right now, but just developing their metacognition through daily reflection will be a skill that they can carry with them for a long time. You hear all the children screaming in the background, guys. It is real here. All right, there we go. I'm going to stop screen sharing. If there are questions, I can take some. Okay. Becky, I think you or Neil were going to field questions. I can pull up some that were sent in if that's helpful.
You incorporated a lot of them, but if you want to pull up some of them and go through them, if anyone has any questions they want to submit in the chat too, we have the chat open for that as well.
They're going on the trampoline, guys. Okay, so how to handle the situation when kids are not in the mood for academic learning. It makes it hard to follow a daily schedule, 100%. I think one, building in elements of choice to the day can do that, right? If you set up expectations now, right, that every day we're going to have to do some daily learning, but the kid can decide when that occurs, that might be helpful. I don't obviously know your child, right? So there's different strategies depending. Some children will do best if no matter what, they're told that they just have to do the academics first, right? The reality is they probably don't feel like learning every day when they're in school, but they go to school before they have their sports afterwards, right? Or before they hang out with their friends afterwards. So that's another way. And then I think also, if you can be explicit about sort of the point systems that we talked about and really have a conversation with your children about, what's something that they want to be doing with this time, right? And how can you leverage their academic work to help them get access to something they're super excited about. Those are my thoughts on that one. Independent play for presumably younger children. I'm going to go ahead and guess on that one. I think, yeah, this is interesting, right? Because a lot of our children are hyper scheduled when we can leave our homes, and now they're not. And it would be great if they would sit and, play Legos for an hour by themselves. So some of that is going to be about connection, right? So if you can create a little bit of time to get them started playing and really play intently for 10 minutes, oftentimes they will then continue on their own, right? Or if you just watch them play and comment on what they're doing, hey, I really like how you're being so focused on building that. You're building a great house. And then again, they'll continue. It's gonna be something that you build up to over time if your kids aren't generally independent playing. Another cool thing to do is to leave toys out, kind of poised for play, right? So rather than saying like, hey, go grab a puzzle, you get up in the morning and you put you put the puzzle, that was hard to say, on the table, and you put a couple of the pieces together and put everything turned up, and kids kind of are naturally curious and will stumble upon that throughout the day, and it will distract them and be a thing that they do. Those are my ideas. I'm trying to think if I did say we're going to build up to that. So I think also just for you, having in mind that, if they can do 5 minutes today, then tomorrow try for 10. But if they can do 5 minutes, it's not going to happen that they'll go straight to an hour tomorrow. Books. Again, there's a little bit of line holding here. I don't know what age child we're talking about with the books. Younger kids, it's hard work to read books. And so I have built that into the academic time with my younger kids. Older kids, if they've not been readers up till now, that's a tough sell. But again, anything that you think is super important can be worked into the day. I would just encourage you to have an open conversation with older kids about why you are setting the priorities you're setting, and include in that opportunity for them to talk about their priorities. And if you're not able to express why something is important, then maybe it's a thing to let go of. I know some families have really wanted their kids getting up at the same time they do when they go to high school and getting dressed in the same way when they go to high school. And if there's a reason behind that, if you feel like they need to, learn to dress professionally and they're going to have one day a week where that's a thing that they practice, wonderful. But if you can't articulate a reason, I would let it go. So in terms of books as a way to avoid screen time, if the goal is avoiding screen time, then have a conversation. I would suggest having a conversation with your child about just generally avoiding screen time and what are other things that they might be willing and excited to do. Because I'm sure there's something that doesn't involve a screen that sounds good. And rules, we need rules now that we didn't need before because life has changed. And I think if you can articulate why you need those rules, then it's fair game to institute them. How do I manage working from home and schooling my children at the same time? Poorly. I think I am trying to limit my live work interactions to a maximum of 4 hours during the day. That's a thing that I largely have the luxury to do. I'm doing a lot of 8 to midnight project work. That's just been how we've leveraged. I have moved in with my sister, and she and I are taking turns. Not everyone's going to move in with their sister. I think I've been very clear with people at work about what I am doing and how I'm trying to make it work, and I'm transparent about when my kids might interrupt. Kind of the beautiful thing and the terrible thing is that we're all definitely in the same boat. And so everyone's understanding. And if you can figure out what works for you and communicate that, I have found everyone to be okay with what we're trying to do here. And what is the best way to keep kids focused on near-term school assignments during the day when they constantly want to take breaks and do other things? I would go hard on the timers for that. Rather than saying you can't do anything fun until you complete this assignment, I would go into, we're going to do 20 minutes of work and then a 5-minute break, and 20 minutes of work and a 5-minute break, and then a half-hour break, or whatever the system is there. If you set up a schedule tied to the time of day, right? If you're alternating things, then it's very clear when they get to do the things they want. I think kids and people generally get desperate when it's not clear that there is an end time to the less fun things that we're doing. And so if you can be explicit about what that end time is, that will help. And I think also just having a conversation about what the expectations are as far as school things. The reality is, that's changing even at the school level, right? So if you don't have a clear understanding of what the school's expectations are, I would start there. They might not know either. And just try to have your child and you recognize the reality of what needs to get done and why that needs to get done. Lots of conversations, I guess, is what I'm advocating for on that front. Oh, I see a question in the Q&A.
Yeah, I was just going to flag that.
Well done. What do you suggest parents do that have children with an IEP and are struggling to teach them without knowledge of teaching? Super tough. And a super tough question because IEPs can include all sorts of things, and all sorts of learning disabilities, and also depending on the age. So I want more information. I'm going to try to do a big, broad answer. I think I would be inclined to look at what the accommodations are that your child's IEP allows for. The school should be able to tell you that, and maybe you know, because maybe you were at the IEP meeting. If it's things like, I'm going to go through some of the more common accommodations, extended time, then I would be inclined to coordinate with the school about what expectations are reasonable for your child. The school has a continued obligation to provide modifications and accommodations. And that's tough for them, and it might not be on the front of their minds, but if you put it there, then they absolutely positively should work with you. That's extended time. If it extended time, class notes is a thing. Also, the school should be providing for that. I think as parents, we often have the expectation that our kids take notes, but that's accommodation they get at school. Maybe you're taking notes for them as you're teaching them. I suspect, I don't know why, that we're talking about a younger kid, because if you're actively teaching them, that tends to be the younger ones. Yeah, you don't have a teaching background. I think part of me wants to say, like, understand that and forgive yourself and tell your child that, because even younger children, if they're school age kids, they are capable of understanding that for the most part. And just lots of patience. I think I I almost want to say I will follow up with you directly if we can get your email and try to have more information so I can give a better answer that is tailored to your situation. Because again, so many possibilities here that I'm struggling. All right. That it? Did we get it? I hit all of the questions that were sent in. Oh, I'm a liar. There was a new one. Says the right balance during this time. I would talked about the balance, giving them more free time. We respect free time, but I'm not sure where to push for more learning and where to let it go. I can only tell you what I've let go, which is not a blanket, everyone should let go of the things that I let go, right? Because I want to go back to the different priorities that different households have. And I absolutely respect everyone's decisions right now. In working with my daughter, it has become very obvious to me where her strengths and weaknesses are. And the work that when she goes to do it is extremely clearly busy work, I have let go. If it is things she's excited to do, even if I don't think it's hard, she does it, I turn it in, lovely. But if it's things where it's clearly a weakness of hers, I've been tending to continue to push those because I want to see her continue to grow. And I am terrified for all the teachers come the fall when first graders miss 3 months of first grade and whatever. So I'm feeling like I'm trying to help out on the front of where the weaknesses are. Also, if it's a beautiful day, sometimes I let it all go. But not always. So that's what I've done. Not to say that's what you should do. So many questions. Sorry, guys. I saw new ones coming in even here. Managed homeschooling with 2 young kids. This is really where you see inequality. Yes. Yeah, so this is about how to get everyone in the family contributing. I'm going to go back to, I'm a big fan of the chore list. I think it's awesome. Yep. 3rd grader with ADHD and a 2-year-old. Keeping the really little ones busy is so hard. I can, again, for the little ones, I mean, look, a 2-year-old's not going to entertain themselves for an hour like that. They can't. I think to the extent that you can give the younger kids work to do while the older one's doing work, I know that a lot of them are excited about those sorts of things. So I have done things like print out coloring sheets. And my son is excited to do his work while my daughter does some of her work. We got a puppy right at the beginning of all of this. My son is excited to go outside and play with the puppy for a little bit while we get things done. There are some things where my older daughter needs a good amount of support. And that's where I broke down. We have an iPad 2, like from forever ago iPad that we usually only take out for flights, and I have taken it out. There's some games on there that are okay, and if he needs to play a game for 20 minutes so my daughter can do her reading, that's what happens. Um, and then otherwise, I try to have them as together as I can. She reads to him, which I think is awesome. If you can make some of the work that the older one's doing also an activity for the younger one, killer. Um, yeah, but the little ones, I do not have a magic solution there. I wish I did. Another question. Person sending in the questions, if you send me your email, I will send you a real response.
We also will send a follow-up thank you that has Jenna's email in it. So you'll have all that information as well, and we can answer some of those questions and provide some resources as well.
Yes, yeah, and please do feel free to email me. I'll do my best.
Awesome. Thank you, Jenna, so much. And thank you guys for coming. We really appreciate it.
Thanks, everybody. Good luck. You're doing great. I feel like if you take nothing away from this, like if you are doing what your family needs, you are winning.
Thank you, Jenna. Thank you, Becky. Thank you, everyone at Private Prep. And again, if anyone has any questions, there's going to be an email going out that you can reach out to Jenna directly, or you can contact us and we'll put you in touch with, someone at Private Prep that can help you guys out. They're doing great work, and this has been beyond helpful for myself and a lot of the people that joined. So thank you.
My pleasure. Have a good one, everybody.
Bye.